Yo, what's checking, everybody? It's Geoff. It's Anwar. It's the Orange Bloods Texas football channel. It's Texas OU week. We're here. We got you covered. We're talking Casey Thompson, Charles Thompson today. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you're so inclined. And click that little bell that ensures that every time we release a new video, you are alerted to it. You won't miss anything here on the Orange Bloods Texas football channel. Anwar, the Casey Thompson, this like a Casey Thompson / Charles Thompson discussion. It feels like we've waited 4 years for this guy to be in this spot, to be in this game. And now that we're here, it's a really cool story.
I mean, it is. And you're more familiar with Charles Thompson. You know, we started talking about it a little bit more in the Overreaction Monday, and you posted a video. I think you sent it to me on Slack. You retweeted it on Twitter. And it was fascinating to watch the highlights. Didn't see a completed pass, but for the most part, I saw him as a dynamic runner. But to think of an OU legacy guy at quarterback, and now that's his son. And he also had another son that went to OU and played for OU. And then to have another son be at Texas against your rival, it is a fascinating story. It's one that has been starting to be talked about, will be talked about throughout the week. Casey was asked about it a little bit on Monday. And Ketchy admitted, you know, he said basically he was born into it. So he didn't really have a choice. You know, and so he was used to that, you know, hating Texas and growing up. And the only time he said it really switched for him was during the recruiting process, where he realized, well, I can't just limit my options. And so then he kind of became off of that, became a little bit more neutral.
Mainly because Oklahoma like shrugged their shoulders and said, yeah, we're good.
Pretty much.
We're good.
And Tim Beck, for all the scrutiny that he got, was able to go in there and pluck him out and find a guy. And yeah, and so then he became a Texas fan, clearly, and now his family is all rooting for him. So it is something that's going to be talked about a lot, Catch, but it is an interesting dynamic. It's not Catch, let me ask you this. It's not like the Brockermeyers going to Bama, right? It's not to that degree, right? There's a lesser degree of that, correct?
I mean, look, I can't speak for the way Oklahoma fans are processing Charles Thompson's kid starting for. Part of it is Texas has been Oklahoma's whipping boy for so long that almost everything that Texas does, I think Oklahoma on some level thinks, oh, that's cute. You know, I mean, they still look at Steve Sarkisian, and this is just, you know, they heard the same thing about Charlie Strong and about Tom Herman. You'll forgive them even if they think Steve Sarkisian is a different animal. Oklahoma's had so much dominance in this game that I don't know that they know how to process it fully. If Texas were to win and Casey Thompson is a big reason why, I think it sinks in at that point as an Oklahoma fan, just how monumental of an occurrence this is. Look, Shane Buechele was the Texas quarterback, and his entire family were Oklahoma fans, and that was a story. But their dad wasn't, you know, Shane Buechele's dad wasn't a legend at Oklahoma on the football field. Charles Thompson is that, and you know, it's a different era. They played such a different brand of football, almost the way they pass the ball. They ran it that much more. You know, it is apples and oranges as a sport in a long way. It's funny because we're starting to see Casey Thompson do things with his feet as a player that would make you think, oh, of course, that's Charles Thompson's son, right? But Casey Thompson, to me, was a guy that showed up at Texas as a guy that would use his feet to set up passing situations first and foremost. Not too dissimilar from, I think, the way we view Hudson Card, a mobile guy, but when he moves around, there previously hadn't been enough decisiveness that he was a plush runner. He never seemed completely comfortable in that role. When I watched Casey in the bowl game last year, I was impressed by how poised he was when he started to use his feet and then could get himself back under control and complete a pass. So I was like, okay, he's one of these guys that's mobile, but he's only mobile in the sense that he's just trying to buy more time to throw the ball. Spencer Rattler is a lot like that. He's a mobile guy, but he's always looking to throw the football. Casey's one of the real strengths of him as a player right now that makes him different than Hudson Card is that starting with that Arkansas game, we've seen an aggressive runner. I mean, it was one of the first things Sark mentioned, I think on Monday, because I wouldn't have heard the Saturday post game, but he talked about, look, struggling a little bit as a passer, but man, breaks off that 41-yard run. And like everybody talks about the lack of explosive plays in the passing game. Well, that counted as an explosive play, right? I mean, so you say Casey Thompson wasn't doing it in the air, and I think there's a little bit of consternation on the deep balls right now, but those plays are being created, and that they're starting to be created by Casey's feet. If he breaks off a big run on Saturday, Anwar, the clips of Charles Thompson running on Texas will be queued up and ready to go. They already will be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to be cute. I mean, there's definitely going to be that focus, on it. If you're Charles Thompson, you got to figure out your wardrobe because you're going to be on camera at all times, right? I mean, you just know the camera's going to be at you on every single moment. So you got to figure out, if you're Charles Thompson, unless you're wearing the all gas, no brakes hat this weekend, you got to get a fresh haircut this week. You got to be clean shaven.
No excuses.
No. Like the world will be watching you, Charles. So you got to, Charles, just so you know, come clean or you're going to get embarrassed.
Like Thanksgiving and Christmas will be painful because the family members will be like, yo,
yeah,
couldn't get a haircut that week.
But what's interesting, Ketch, talking to Casey about it on Monday, he talked about that how he grew up and having, sitting with the families and section at the all times and go to the OU thing. And then after he committed, he went to the Texas OU game. And he said he was about 2 seats away from the OU side because he sat on the Texas side. He said that was the first time it was a little bit weird for him to sit around there because, I mean, he won't admit it. He grew up an OU fan. He did the horns down at some point in his life.
Of course.
Many a times. He don't want to piss off anybody, but it's a rite of passage. That's what you do. So he grew up doing that. And now it's like, oh, that's not cool. Nah, you guys can't do that. It's kind of directed towards me. And so he's been to this game, Catch. He's attended it as a backup. This is the first time he's actually going to do it as a starter. I'll be interested to see how Casey handles kind of the nerves that are involved in that, because he's talked a little bit like he gets a little nervous before game, not Donovan McNabb throwing up kind of craziness, but the natural goosebumps that go into it. And I brought this up, about last year. Last year when guys played in this game, it was only a fourth of the way full. This is the first year that a lot of these guys will have that full experience. In this, Casey will have the full experience of running out the tunnel and having everyone scream at him directly. They were screaming at Sam previously. Casey was just an afterthought because he wasn't the guy that played. They're screaming at you. OU fans hate you now. And I don't know if how they feel about Charles, because I believe he still lives in Oklahoma. So I don't know how much they dislike him. But I tell you, but here's the most fascinating story that he said, Catch, was he talked about how he had teachers in high school who told him, man, if you ever go to Texas, we'll never support you. We'll never root for you. He said he had friends the same way. And I thought to myself, that's kind of effed up as a teacher. Like, what message are you sending to a young man? I get what you like, the programs and stuff, but man, tone it down and teach just stay in your lane. Teach math, teach social studies, stay with your English class. Like, no one wants to hear your damn opinion, but it will be interesting now that I think his performance, Catch, will determine how much Oklahoma fans dislike him or in the future. If he does well, then the Oklahoma fans dislike him. It's a good thing. But to your point, Catch, if there's a struggle, then it's going to be like, oh, that was a cute story, but we want it for, another year.
Yeah, this doesn't mean anything until or unless Casey wins this game. And then the moment that he does, it's an incredible story. I mean, I think we've all got to be careful not to treat this as some sort of routine thing that just happens all the time. But because I can't ever remember an Iron Bowl where the starting quarterback at either Alabama or Auburn was a legacy of a legend at the other school. I don't remember that happening in an Ohio State, Michigan game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where,
yeah,
one day I don't expect Tom Brady to have a kid quarterbacking for Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this has never happened before, really, in the history of college football that I can think of. I mean, there may be baby examples of this, but I can't ever remember. And it goes back to, look, Casey was a really heralded prospect. I've never known an in-state powerhouse to not go all in or offer such a strong legacy kid when the legacy kid is such a legacy, right? Let me give you an example. When Quandre Diggs was being recruited, that's Quentin Jammer's brother. And Quandre Diggs was like a top 10 player in the state. So it's predating you a little bit. But Quandre will still talk about this on Twitter. Like, it's a part of like his story that when he was first being recruited, Texas didn't offer him and they weren't offering him. And there was this reaction of like, what do you mean we're not offering a guy that's a big time prospect whose brother was literally an All-American defensive back? And eventually Texas gave in to the peer pressure. That whole thing, I don't want to go off a tangent here, but because Quandre Diggs didn't have a position. They didn't know whether he was going to play offense or defense. None of the coaches on either side of the ball wanted to count him as one of their numbers. And it's like, he's a legacy. It's rare, really rare, when a guy, like, it's one of the things about the Tommy Brockermeyer with the brother James, his offer coming later, like Texas was a little slow on the James Brockermeyer offer. Part of the reaction to that was, what are you doing? He's a legacy of an All-American. I say all of this because it's still stunning to me that Oklahoma didn't go after Casey Thompson stronger than they did. Their aloofness to him as a prospect is why he's at Texas today. It sets the stage for, because think about it, Anwar, when you first arrived, it seemed like every game that was on TV, an announcer would say, well, Texas didn't recruit this guy as a quarterback.
Oh, geez.
You know what I mean?
If I had $1 for every time I watched the replay and they said about Charlie Brewer.
Yes.
That was that entire game.
And if Charlie Brewer, it's Oklahoma allowed this situation to occur. And it's a situation when ESPN Game Day does their piece on Saturday. Nobody should roll their eyes at that. This is a historical event, and that Casey Thompson, along with, I believe, Spencer Rattler, are the two most important players in this game, just adds to it. It's not like he's just a guy on the roster. I think I can tell you, if Texas wins the ball game right now, if you tell me Casey Thompson's stat line. Now, maybe not, right? Because if you'd showed me that stat line last week and said, this is what Texas is going to do against TCU, I would have picked TCU to win the game. But that felt like an anomaly. I feel like if you tell me how Casey Thompson does in this game before the game starts, we're going to have a real good idea of how this game goes for Texas. It's a story that can't be talked about enough.
Let me ask you a question, Ketch. We probably got like another 5 minutes before we wrap up. And I've been thinking about this as we're talking. I've been writing down some notes, and I'm going to ask you a question. So historically, when I say historically, over the past 10 or so years, whatever it's been, Oklahoma has had the clear quarterback advantage going into this game, whether it was Baker Mayfield at one point, followed by Kyler Murray, followed by Jalen Hurts. They've had the advantage. Now, we thought last year that Texas would have the advantage with Sam being the fourth year senior, and Spencer Rattler would be the freshman. And we thought, okay, finally Texas has the advantage in this matchup.
Well, and it played out that way for a half.
For a half, it definitely looked that way. And then it didn't.
And then it didn't.
Right? And I don't know what we would call it when it was all said and done. I guess Spencer Rattler ends up being a Big 12 quarterback, and then it did it. So in this game, Ketch, I'm asking, who has the advantage at the quarterback position right now? Is it Texas with what you see from Casey, or would you give it to Spencer?
I'm going to give it to Spencer right now based off of experience, in the sense that, we talked about it last week, it being Casey's first road start, but that wasn't like a big deal. And then he got into the game, and then afterwards it was like, well, that was Casey's first road start, right? And he's still doing that. And even though he's playing better football right now than Spencer Rattler's been through a few more fires. And only that reason would I think give it to Spencer Rattler right now. It feels like a coin flip for me. What about you?
I'm leaning towards that, even though, I'm looking up Spencer's numbers as we're talking right now, because
I'm talking 53-47. You know what I mean? Like it really is a coin flip for me.
I mean, Spencer has 1,260 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. What's Casey got? You got it off the top of your head? If not, I'll make it really bad.
I mean, Casey's got, I think, the 1 interception and 9 touchdowns, I think.
Yeah, let me check it. I'll make this into a really bad video. When you do it live.
The thing is, what right now Casey Thompson's doing a better job of is he's throwing the ball down the field a little more than Spencer Rattler. The difference in the two quarterbacks thus far, really, is because Spencer is a more accurate quarterback. I mean, but all of that is because he's throwing the ball shorter, whereas Casey's been a big intermediate guy. And the difference kind of in their ratings is that Casey's yards per attempt is higher, I think by a couple of yards maybe. And God, I haven't even looked at that, so I could be way wrong, but I'm just thinking of their ratings and how they're set up right now. And right now, the 4 interceptions that that Rattler has is the difference. Casey's got like a 20-point lead on him in ratings efficiency, but it's small sample size for both of those guys. I mean, Spencer Rattler was a guy that got really hot over the second half of the season, really coming out of that Texas game. And Casey Thompson's obviously a guy that just made his first road start, is making his first Texas OU start. And, but it's close. I don't have a good feel for, let me answer this question. I'll throw it back to you like this. I don't know who I expect to play better.
Mm-hmm. Who do you think blinks first? Who do you think blinks first?
Rattler.
Yeah.
But
that would be my guess too.
I don't think it's necessarily blinking if Casey Thompson doesn't see something. Mm-hmm. And I think, there were some stats that came out on Twitter yesterday. I posted them on orangebloods.com that showed Casey's efficiency in all of the different quadrants of the field. So it was within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and then 10 to 20 yards. Casey, to make it real short, because I know we're going to have to wrap this thing up. Casey is a guy that, through his small sample size, puts almost all of his passes right of the hash mark of the left. So of the left hash mark, everything is this way. Mm-hmm. And they're only using 2/3 of the field, but really when you looked at the numbers, Casey's there's a section of the field where almost all of his stuff goes. And as teams begin to get film on Casey and data on Casey, they're going to be like, oh, okay, these are his sweet spot areas. I think Oklahoma's going to be dropping their linebackers back this week. And if Casey doesn't see the linebackers of Oklahoma better than he saw the linebackers of Iowa State, against TCU last weekend, he's going to get picked off. And I don't think that's blinking or flinching as much as there's still a piece of his development that's ongoing and stuff like that happens. Like, I think both quarterbacks are going to turn the ball over on Saturday.
I would not put that past it just because, I mean, they've turned the ball over just in nearly every game, right? Casey's tried to make passes and I think he, threw that pass to Xavier with the assumption that the pass interference would be called, and it wasn't. And so because it wasn't called, it ends up being an interception. He's thinking the pass interference at the worst, at the least, at best, Xavier Worthy catches the ball. They obviously were tugging on him. It should have been called. It wasn't. But yeah, you expect that to happen. It's interesting. When I say blink, I think of that Texas OU game when we talked about Sam versus Kyler.
Yeah.
And how it was back and forth. And then it was Kyler that made the mistake.
He blinked. Like
he blinked. That was the
Which
game.
of these two defenses is better poised to make the other quarterback flinch a little bit more? If you're Texas, I think that worries you. Oklahoma comes in. I think Texas comes into this game. Last thing I'll say, my final comment. Texas comes into this game with the better offense. A lot of that is Bijan centric. He is the war daddy of all war daddies in this game. But Oklahoma comes into this game, in my mind, with a clearly the best defense in this game. And, it'll be best versus best. And, I'm not quite sure how I think that battle is going to ultimately go.
The thing I would love to look up, and I don't have it in front of me, I would love to see where some of these other offenses that Oklahoma's faced have been ranked within their conference or ranked nationally. I don't think Texas is super high as far as like conference rankings, but it'd be interesting to see that. But we know what this offense can do when they're on the A game. I'm with you.
Texas is first in the Big 12 in offense.
Okay, so this would be the best offense that Oklahoma has faced, right? So
yeah,
they haven't faced offenses that we know that can just put up the points at will to a certain degree. And maybe Texas isn't a at will point yet, but we know they can put it up, right? We know if they get hot and they get cooking, then we know they do. We don't necessarily think of West Virginia as an offense that can get cooking, right? I mean, and we don't think of any of the other teams that they played that had dynamic offenses. This will be, while they talk about, hey, this what this team looks like against the run, it's still.
But they also have that they've got street cred carryover,
correct,
from last year, where by the end of the year they were a really good defense, and they've returned a bunch of guys. And now
you and I both think Nick Bonito is a stud. So I mean,
and that's an NFL player.
Yeah, that goes without saying. Like he's that good. So we know this defense can be good, but we know this defense is going to get challenged and it's going to get stretched. So it would be really interesting. I enjoyed the conversation, by the way.
Yeah, man. This is going to be a fun game. It's going to be a fun game. We'll be talking about it all week long here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. Anwar's got to go interview some guys. So otherwise we just keep talking. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. He's going from one Zoom call to the next. Click on the notifications bell, ring that bell so that we can alert you when we have videos. But for Anwar and myself, we're doing buy or sell tomorrow. So get your questions ready. We'll talk to you soon. You guys take care of each other. Later.